On Mother's Day, my daughter gave her mother-in-law a $20,000 ring and 2 tickets for a luxury Mediterranean cruise. I got a $5 plastic flower and a card that could have come from the gas station. The next day, she called me 28 times. My name is Evelyn Morgan. I'm 67 years old, and I thought I had experienced every kind of heartbreak life could throw at a person. I thought losing my husband, Kenneth, was the worst it would get. I thought raising my only child on my own and building a company from nothing would have earned me something close to respect. I was wrong. That Sunday started quietly. I woke up to the sound of nothing. No footsteps down the hall, no voice calling for breakfast, just silence. The kind that doesn't bring peace anymore, only sharp reminders of all the conversations I'll never have again. I made coffee for one, sat in my kitchen, and told myself to just get through the day. The night before, my daughter, Marissa, had called. Her voice was tight, like she was already elsewhere. "Mom, we're having brunch at Henry's mom's place tomorrow. You should come. 1:00. Not, we'd love to have you. Not, can't wait to see you. Just, you should come. Like an obligation dressed up as an invitation. Still, I went. Patricia's house, Henry's mother, was the kind of place you see in interior design magazines. All white marble, symmetrical flower arrangements, minimalist, sterile perfection. The driveway was already full when I arrived. Expensive cars lined the pavement, and I could hear the hum of conversation and laughter drifting from the backyard. When I walked in through the gate, I saw them all at the patio table. Patricia in a pale pink sundress, laughing softly as she poured champagne into delicate flutes. Marissa was beside her, their heads leaned close together, sharing a private joke I wasn't part of. Henry, my son-in-law, was manning the grill, flipping burgers like he was in a commercial for Ideal Suburban Sons. "Evelyn," Patricia said with a wide, practiced smile, "so glad you could make it." Marissa glanced up and gave me a shallow nod. "Hi, Mom. You can sit over there." She pointed to a seat at the far end of the table, out of view of the conversation, out of view. I sat down quietly and watched. Patricia's friends were there, along with Henry's sister and her children, all talking about vacations, wine pairings, and home renovations. I listened as an outsider, waiting for someone to ask me anything. Then came the gift-giving. "Oh, Patricia, we have something special for you," Marissa said, standing with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen on her face since she was little. Henry joined her carrying a small velvet box and a sleek envelope. Patricia's hand went to her chest as she opened the box. Inside was a diamond ring, easily 5 carats, sparkling like it had its own lighting crew. Gasps followed. She clutched Marissa and whispered, "This is too much." "It's not too much for the woman who raised such a wonderful son," Marissa replied, wrapping her arms around Patricia's neck. "And there's more," she added, handing over the envelope. 2 first-class tickets on a cruise through the Mediterranean. Patricia cried. Everyone applauded. I clapped too, because what else was I supposed to do? Then Henry turned toward me. "And now for Grandma Evelyn." The energy shifted. His voice didn't carry the same warmth. Marissa walked over and handed me a small paper bag. Inside was a plastic flower. Red, cheap, the kind you'd find stuck in a clearance bin near the seasonal candy. There was a card, too. I opened it. The printed message read, "Happy Mother's Day." Beneath it, in Marissa's handwriting, "Thanks for everything." That was it. Thanks for everything. The table went quiet. Even Patricia looked uncomfortable. Henry cleared his throat. No one quite knew how to fill the silence. "It's lovely," I managed to say, forcing a smile that I prayed didn't look as cracked as I felt. "Thank you, dear." But Marissa was already turning away, back to Patricia, launching into a conversation about the cruise itinerary. They moved on. I didn't. I sat there for another hour, holding the flower like it meant something, watching my daughter light up for another woman, laugh like she used to laugh with me. When I finally stood to leave, she barely glanced at me. "Thanks for coming, Mom. Drive safe." The drive home was one long blur of thoughts I couldn't quiet. I kept seeing that moment. Her arms around Patricia, the joy on her face, the look she hadn't given me in years. When was the last time she had asked me what I wanted? When was the last time she had planned anything for me that didn't involve an obligation? I pulled into my driveway and just sat there, staring at that ridiculous flower sitting on the passenger seat. I had been her mother for 43 years, and that was what I was worth now? A last-minute trinket? The leftover love after everything valuable had been handed to someone else? That night I didn't sleep. I kept replaying it all. The ring, the cruise, the laughter, the silence when I opened my card. Around midnight, I walked into my home office, the room where I'd spent the better part of my adult life building a company from the ground up. Every shelf was lined with folders. Contracts, taxes, balance sheets, years of work, years of success. And none of it meant anything in that moment. I didn't want to cry, but I couldn't stop myself. What had I built all this for? The next morning, I didn't make coffee. Instead, I sat in my quiet kitchen with a legal pad and a pen. No laptop, no phone. Just ink on paper and a question that had been burning holes in my chest since Mother's Day. What do I owe them? I wrote down every financial string that still connected me to Marissa and Henry. Every line item, every automatic payment, every service agreement, every monthly favor disguised as obligation. The house, still under my name. The landscaping contracts, 3 commercial properties, all handled by Henry's failing business. The bookkeeping referrals, 6 small clients I had passed along to Marissa because she needed the income. My eyes stopped on one word. Needed. When had she last actually needed anything? She lived in a designer home with 2 SUVs in the driveway. Her children were in private school. Her vacations included international flights and luxury resorts. None of it earned, all of it expected. And I had allowed it. I had enabled it. For years, I convinced myself that love meant giving, that a good mother never let her children fall. But if I just gave enough, eventually I would receive something real in return. But I was wrong. What I got instead was a cheap plastic flower and a daughter who didn't even look up when I left. By noon, I called Margaret Chen, my attorney of 12 years. She answered on the second ring. "Evelyn, you all right?" "No," I said quietly. "But I'm ready." I met her the next morning in her corner office downtown. From her window, you could see the building I'd built, Morgan & Vail Consulting, standing tall, steel and glass against the skyline, a symbol of everything I had poured myself into. Margaret handed me tea as I settled into the chair across from her. "You look exhausted," she said gently. "I am, but I'm also finally clear." Margaret didn't rush me. She never did. "I want to sell the business. Quietly. Completely. No one can know until the contracts are final." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." "Is this about your daughter?" I nodded. "It's about understanding the cost of being needed for the wrong reasons." We spent the next 2 hours going over details, buyer criteria, transition timelines, employee retention clauses. Margaret agreed to find a brokerage partner to quietly field offers. If we moved quickly, she said, it could be done in 4 months. "Evelyn," she said finally, lowering her voice. "You do realize this will cut them off completely." "I know." "You're prepared for that?" I looked out the window at the city I'd given so much to. I've spent 67 years preparing everyone else for life. I think it's time I prepared myself for something else. When I got home that afternoon, I didn't feel sad. I felt focused, like something had clicked into place. I walked into my office and stared at the wall of photos. Old business galas, community awards, handshakes with mayors and senators. Not a single picture of Marissa and me from the last 5 years. That night, I called Henry's landscaping business. He answered on the third ring, chipper and professional. "This is Henry Wallace, Wallace Greenscapes. How can I help you?" "Hi, Henry. It's Evelyn." "Oh, Mrs. Morgan. How are you? Everything okay?" "I wanted to let you know I'm putting my landscaping contracts up for review. Getting bids from new vendors. Budget constraints." There was a pause. "Of course. I mean, sure. We'd be happy to renegotiate. It's not about rates. It's about exploring options." Long silence. "Right. Sure. Well, keep me posted." I didn't respond. I just hung up. An hour later, I emailed all 6 of my small business clients who'd been using Marissa's bookkeeping services. I told them I was ending all personal referral arrangements and that they'd need to find new service providers within 60 days. Short, professional, no explanations. At 7:16 p.m., my phone rang. "Mom?" Marissa's voice was sharp, tight. "Mrs. Patterson said you're not referring clients anymore. Did I do something wrong?" "No, dear, I'm just simplifying my business operations." "But, Mom, that's my income." "I'm sure you'll find other opportunities. You're very capable." Her silence was like static on the line. "You're acting weird. Is something wrong?" "No, just busy." I hung up. Then I walked into the kitchen, looked up that hideous little plastic flower, and smiled, because for the first time in years I had made a decision without checking how it would impact anyone else. And I wasn't sorry. The following week, I met with 3 potential buyers, all vetted by Margaret. One was a national firm looking to expand regionally. Another was a husband-wife team wanting to step into retirement from corporate life. The third was a young woman with bright eyes and a sharp mind. She reminded me of myself when I first started. I liked her the most. 3 weeks into the process, I got a call. "Mrs. Morgan, this is James Morrison from Morrison and Associates. We're conducting due diligence on the acquisition of Morgan and Vale. Is now a good time?" My heart dropped. "How did you get this number?" I asked slowly. "It was given to us by your assistant. She said we could confirm financial details directly." I froze. "I don't have an assistant." "Oh, I apologize. A young woman answered and said she was acting as your liaison. I may have dialed your home number by mistake." I hung up and immediately called my house. It rang 4 times. Then a familiar voice answered. "Mrs. Morgan's residence, this is Marissa." I felt rage climb through me like heat. "What are you doing in my house?" There was a pause. "Mom? I thought you were out. I just stopped by to water your plants." "I don't have plants that need watering." "Okay, fine. I was looking for some old tax documents. Henry needed them." "And you answered my phone because—" It kept ringing. I thought it might be important. I was already in the car. 15 minutes later, I pulled into my driveway. Her car was there. Inside, I found her in my office, my desk covered in papers. Contracts, statements, broker notes, purchase agreements. She looked up when I walked in. "Mom, what is this? You're selling the company?" I didn't speak. I walked calmly over to the desk and started gathering the documents, one by one. "These are private." "Private? This affects all of us." I stopped. Looked at her. "What about us?" I repeated, tasting the words slowly. She folded her arms. "This is about Mother's Day, isn't it? About the stupid gift. I said I was sorry." I nearly laughed. "Tight on money, are you?" I asked, my voice cold. "While living in a house I pay for, driving cars I bought, working clients I gave you. You're twisting this." "No, Marissa. I'm seeing it clearly." I walked out, leaving her stunned in my office. That night, the calls began. The first came at 6:47 a.m. I didn't answer. By 8 a.m., she'd called 12 times. Voicemails piled up, some begging, some angry, some guilt-laced. "David's having chest pains from the stress, Mom. Please don't destroy our lives. Everyone will think you're being cruel." I stopped counting after 20. By noon, the total was 28. I knew because I wrote it down. I wasn't answering. Because for once, I was finally being heard. By the time the doorbell rang that afternoon, I already knew who it would be. I stood up from my kitchen chair, walked slowly to the door, and looked through the peephole. There they were, Marissa and Henry. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. He looked tense, his jaw tight, arms crossed in that defensive posture I'd seen 100 times. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "Mom, please," Marissa began immediately, her voice trembling. "We need to talk about this like adults." I didn't move. "We tried that yesterday, remember? You were more interested in pretending to be my assistant and going through my private files." Henry stepped forward. "Mrs. Morgan, with all due respect, this is bigger than just you. It's affecting all of us. We have a family." "So do I cut in quietly. "And I'm finally learning how to take care of her." Marissa flinched like I slapped her. "I'm begging you, Mom," she said, eyes glossy again. "Please, don't do this." I leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "You're begging me now. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Not because you needed something, just because you cared." She looked down. Silence. I waited. "You only visit on holidays," I said softly. "You only call when there's a problem. You only care when something is at risk of being taken away." "Mom, that's not fair," she whispered. "It's accurate." Henry's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. You're punishing us for being successful, for building something for ourselves." "Successful?" I laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Henry, you're 37. You've never made a full mortgage payment on your own. You've taken contracts I gave you and ran them into the ground. Marissa hasn't landed a single client on her own in 6 years." "That's not true," he barked. "We call it family. Families help each other." "Help goes both ways," I snapped. "What exactly have you done to help me?" He had no answer. Neither did she. "I gave you grandchildren," Marissa said suddenly, her voice cracking. I stared at her. "No, you gave birth to children I rarely see. You moved 3 states away, and I haven't had them over in nearly a year. You send photos, sure, but I've become a holiday name to them, not a grandmother." She opened her mouth to respond, then shut it again. Outside, the neighbor's sprinkler hissed to life, watering a perfect green lawn that had no idea how complicated the people standing next to it had become. "I want you to know why Patricia got a cruise and a diamond ring?" I asked. "Because she's treated like family. People call her, people care, people think about what she wants. She gets love because she gives it." Tears spilled from Marissa's eyes, but I didn't soften. "You treat me like a utility, like the electricity. Flip the switch and I better show up. Pay the bill and move along." "Mom, I'm sorry. I know we've taken you for granted. I do. I didn't think it was this bad." "That's the problem. You didn't think at all." Henry looked away, jaw clenched. Marissa wiped her face with her sleeve. "I love you," she said suddenly. "I really love you." I stared at her for a long time. "I believe you think you do. But what you love is convenience. What you love is knowing someone will fix everything when it goes wrong." "No," she whispered. "I mean it." I took a step back. "Then prove it. Not with flowers or gifts or money, with change." Henry took her hand, trying to pull her gently toward the car. "Come on, let's go." But she held firm. "Mom," she said again, more softly, "what do you want from me? What would it take to fix this?" I looked at her. My daughter, 35 years old, crying on my doorstep like she was 10 again and afraid of losing something she couldn't name. "I want you to figure out who you are without my checkbook. I want you to learn how to stand up without leaning on me." She swallowed hard. "And if I do that, would you change your mind?" "No, because this isn't about you anymore. I'm not selling the company to hurt you. I'm selling it to set myself free." She took a step forward, but I put my hand on the door. "I'm 67, Marissa. I've spent my entire life holding other people up. Now I want to find out what it feels like to walk alone." "I love you," she said again. And this time, I believed she meant it. "I love you too," I whispered. "That's why I'm doing this." And I closed the door. I stood there, listening as she cried on my porch. I didn't move. I didn't open it again. I couldn't. Eventually, they left. 2 weeks later, the sale closed. It happened quietly, just like I had asked. Margaret handled the paperwork, the negotiations, the transition. My employees were taken care of, the buyer was respectful, and the business I'd spent 30 days building passed into new hands without drama. And I disappeared. I moved out of my home a few days after the sale. I didn't tell Marissa where I was going. I didn't say goodbye to Henry. I just left. I bought a small cottage on a lake 2 states over. A quiet place with creaky floors, a working fireplace, and wildflowers growing out back. The kind of place you go when you're ready to live for yourself. No name on the mailbox. No one to please. No one to call unless I wanted to. The first few weeks were strange. My phone didn't ring. No appointments. No early meetings. No crises. Just silence. And this time, the silence healed instead of hurt. I filled my days with things I hadn't had time for in decades. Reading, cooking, walking by the lake at sunrise. I started taking pottery classes at a local studio, joined a book club with 3 other women over 60, and for the first time in years, I laughed until my stomach hurt. 6 weeks passed. No calls from Marissa. No voicemails. The stillness was both painful and peaceful. One afternoon, as I was pruning the small garden behind the cottage, my phone buzzed. I pulled off my gloves and glanced at the screen. A message from Margaret. "Thought you should know. Henry filed for bankruptcy. Marissa applied for a teacher's aide job at the local elementary school." I stared at the message. Then I went inside, made a cup of tea, and sat down by the window overlooking the water. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clean. They were making their own way now, finally, for the first time. And I wasn't going to rescue them. Not because I didn't love them, but because I did. And real love, I'd learned, means sometimes letting people fall, letting them rise, letting them grow, even if it means you have to walk away to make room for their becoming. The lake at sunset was fast becoming my favorite part of every day. That golden light that spilled over the trees, the hush that came just before the night air took hold. It felt like nature was exhaling, and finally, I could too. It had been nearly 2 months since I moved. I was learning the rhythms of peace, the sound of ducks flapping near the reeds, the smell of jasmine blooming by my porch, the unexpected kindness of neighbors who waved as they passed but didn't pry. In those early days, I wasn't lonely, I was alone. And for the first time in my adult life, there was a difference. I hadn't heard from Marissa since the day she cried on my porch. Until one morning when I opened my mailbox and found something that stopped me in my tracks. A letter. Not a card, not a text, not an email. An actual handwritten letter. The return address was hers, but the handwriting wasn't the rushed, casual scrawl I knew so well. It was careful, measured, like someone had written, rewritten, and rewritten again. I walked inside, sat in the sunlight at my kitchen table, and opened it. Dear Mom, I've been trying to write this for weeks. I never knew where to begin. At first, I wanted to beg. I wanted to say, please undo this, please come back, please fix it. But I knew that wouldn't be fair, because you didn't break anything. I did. We did. David and I are getting divorced. I guess you probably heard about the bankruptcy already. I'm working part-time at the elementary school now. I help with lunch duty, grading papers, organizing field trips. It's humbling, but I needed to be humbled. For the first time in my life, I'm learning how to pay my own bills. I'm learning how to ask for help the right way, not with entitlement, but with gratitude. And I wanted you to know I finally understand why you did what you did. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were trying to save me from myself. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For taking your love and turning it into a service. For treating you like a resource instead of a person. For never seeing you as someone who needed care, too. I used to think I was a good daughter. I used to believe we were close. But now I realize I never really saw you. Not after Dad died. Not when the silence started settling in your life like dust. I never asked how you were. I never noticed when you started going quiet. And I'm sorry. I know you probably don't believe this, but I've thought about you every day since you left. Not with guilt, but with clarity. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that I kept the plastic flower. It's on my kitchen windowsill. Every time I see it, I remember the way you looked that day, the moment I realized I had truly broken your heart. I'm so sorry it took me that long to care about fixing it. I love you, Mom. Marissa. I stared at the paper in my hands, not realizing I was crying until one of my tears landed near the edge of her signature. I read the letter 3 times, then I set it down carefully and walked to the porch, letting the cold breeze wash over my face. I didn't write back. Not that day. Not the next. I wanted to. Part of me wanted to pour my heart out in return, but I knew better. Some wounds, even when acknowledged, need time to scab over, to thicken, to become strong enough to carry new weight again. Instead, I left the letter on the table beside a stack of mail and opened my journal. I wrote one sentence. She's starting to see me. Weeks passed. Fall arrived at the lake in slow golden waves. The leaves changed color. The morning air turned crisp. I started wearing Kenneth's old flannel shirts when I watered the garden. They still smelled like him, even now. My days were simple. Mornings were filled with coffee and books. Afternoons, I walked along the gravel road, waving to Susan from across the lake. Sometimes we had wine together on her porch. She had 2 sons, both in their 40s. They called every Sunday, they visited often, they brought their own food when they came. I never told her about Marissa. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was protecting the quiet I'd found. And yet, I kept the letter. Not in a drawer, not hidden. I pinned it to the small corkboard above my desk, beside a photo of Kenneth and me on our wedding day. One memory of a man who never once made me feel invisible, and another of a daughter who finally saw me after a lifetime of not looking. I never realized how much I had waited for those words. Not the apology, the understanding. That's what we all want, isn't it? To be understood, to be seen. And yet, I knew better to rush back into her arms. Marissa had changed. I could feel it in her words. But change needs time. It needs action. It needs proof. Love, I had learned the hard way, is not what we give when it's easy. It's what we continue to give when we no longer feel entitled to receive. And so I waited. 1 month turned into 2. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with Susan and her grandchildren, laughing over burnt stuffing and mismatched napkins. No calls from Marissa, but no more voicemails either. Just silence. And peace. And maybe hope. But then on Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed. Not with a call, with a photo. It was Tommy and Lily, Marissa's children, my grandchildren, dressed in pajamas, smiling in front of a crooked little tree. The same plastic flowers sitting on the windowsill behind them. Below the image was a short message. They picked the flower for the photo. They said, "It's Grandma's flower." No pleading, no pressure, just that. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just looked at that image for a long time. Because sometimes the smallest gestures carry the heaviest truths. And sometimes the right kind of love finally learns how to whisper. I set my phone down and stepped outside into the stillness of Christmas Eve. Snow had started to fall in the softest, most gentle way. And I smiled. Because I knew the story wasn't over yet. And neither was my heart. January drifted in with long, sleepy mornings and snow that painted the lake in silence. I found myself waking up with the sun most days, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was something luxurious in the unhurried rhythm of it all. My time belonged only to me now. Marissa didn't call, but she didn't disappear either. Every few weeks, another letter would arrive. Not long ones, not desperate ones, just honest. Small reflections, simple check-ins, bits of her day, pieces of herself she'd never shared before. She wrote about work, how the school kids called her Miss Reese, and how one of them drew her a crayon picture and told her she smelled like cookies. She wrote about therapy, something she'd started on her own. She didn't ask for applause, just mentioned it, quietly, like it mattered. She even wrote about the things she didn't understand back then. The pressure I must have felt running a business, raising a child alone, grieving a husband while still holding everything together like nothing was broken. She said, "I don't know how you did it. I don't know why I never asked." I read those words 3 times before I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into my drawer. I hadn't written back yet. Part of me was still cautious. Not resentful, just protective of the life I'd found, the woman I was still becoming. For the first time in decades, I didn't exist in relation to someone else. I wasn't Mom, Mrs. Morgan, the boss, or the bank. I was just Evelyn. And she was worth getting to know again. One afternoon in early February, Susan and I were walking the perimeter of the frozen lake, bundled in scarves and trading stories about childhood winters. She stopped suddenly and looked at me. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "You ever think about going back to them?" It took me a moment. "I think about it," I said slowly, "but not in the way you might think. I don't miss the old relationship. I miss the one we never had." Susan nodded thoughtfully. That's the hard part, isn't it? Wanting to love someone who didn't know how to love you back. Exactly. I hadn't told her much, only that I'd been taken for granted, that I'd walked away before it swallowed me whole. She never pushed for more. That night, I pulled out the most recent letter from Marissa and read it again. At the bottom, she had added a note. "Tommy asked if you liked frogs. I said I didn't know. He wants to make you a clay one in art class. Lily says she remembers your laugh, and she misses it." I closed my eyes. It hurt in the best possible way. The next morning, I wrote back. "Dear Marissa, yes, I like frogs, especially the clay kind made by little hands. Thank you for your letters. I've read every one. I'm proud of the work you're doing, not just the job, but the personal work. That's the hardest kind. The kind that no one claps for, but changes everything anyway. I want to be clear. I didn't walk away to punish you. I walked away to find myself. I needed to be more than the person who rescued everyone else. And now that I've found her, me, I'm willing to see what's next. Not a reset, not a return to the past, but maybe a beginning. If you want that too, you're welcome to visit. Not to fix anything, just to be. Love, Mom." I sent it without rereading. I didn't want to second-guess the tenderness of it. 3 days later, she replied. Not with a letter. She called. I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Silence. Then she asked, "Can I come see you?" "When?" "Tomorrow. Just me. The kids are with Henry this week." "Okay," I said. "Come around noon. I'll make lunch." She exhaled like she had been holding her breath for months. The next morning, I was up early. I wasn't nervous. Not really. But I did straighten the books on the shelf, wipe down the counter, fluff the couch pillows like they were auditioning for a catalog. I set 2 plates. I made sandwiches. Tomato soup. Nothing fancy, nothing performative. When she arrived, she looked older. Not in a bad way. She looked real. Hair pulled into a loose bun, no makeup, faded jeans, and a scarf I'd knitted her years ago, the one she used to say was too itchy to wear. When she stepped inside, she didn't try to hug me right away. She just looked around, took it all in. "It's beautiful here," she said. "It is. Peaceful." I needed that. We sat at the table, steam rising from the soup between us. She looked down, then up. "I don't expect anything. she said. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. What I did, what I didn't do, how I hurt you. I nodded. She kept going. And I know that being sorry doesn't erase it. I know it will take time. I don't want to rush anything. I'm okay just sitting here, being quiet with you. I felt something release inside me, a knot I hadn't known I was still carrying. Good, I said, because quiet is something I've learned to love. We didn't talk about the business. We didn't rehash every detail. We just sat there eating soup, watching birds hop across the snow outside. At one point, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in tissue. I didn't come empty-handed, she said softly. I smiled. You didn't have to bring anything. I know. She unwrapped it carefully. It was a clay frog, a little lumpy, painted green and yellow, big googly eyes glued on crooked. Tommy made it, she said, placing it gently in front of me. He said frogs are good luck. I picked it up. It was imperfect, childlike, but it was chosen, thoughtful, loved. And that made it the most valuable gift I'd received in years. She didn't stay long. When she left, we didn't make promises. No plans. Just a soft, I'd like to come back. And I nodded. Whenever you're ready. Because this time, there was no timeline. No expectations. Just space. Just choice. Just love that didn't need to be bought to be earned. And that, I knew, was finally enough. The frog sat on my windowsill the next morning, catching the soft light like it belonged there. It was the first thing I saw when I poured my coffee. Something about the crooked grin and clumsy paint made me smile more than I had in weeks. Not because it was beautiful, because it was real. Made by a boy who barely knew me, but had already offered more sincerity than his parents had in years. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to do anything in return. That morning, I took a walk through town. It had taken me time to warm up to the locals here. Retirees, artists, a few families who'd lived in the area for generations. They were kind, but not intrusive. Curious, but respectful. People here didn't ask what you used to do. They asked what you love doing now. At the bakery, Linda waved me in and handed me a fresh cinnamon roll. No charge. You looked like you needed sweetness, she said. At the library, the book club was setting up for their monthly meeting. I had missed the last two, unsure if I was ready for that kind of casual closeness again. But today, I pulled out a chair. We spent the next hour arguing gently over character motivations and plot holes. I hadn't realized how much I missed hearing voices layered over each other, not in chaos, but in community. Afterward, as I walked back to my cottage, I passed Susan on her porch. "You're glowing," she called out. "Did someone finally kiss you?" I laughed. "Not unless Tommy's frog counts." She chuckled. "Well, it's a start." That night, I journaled for the first time in weeks. I wrote, "Today I felt full, and no one had to give me a single thing." 3 days later, Marissa sent another letter. Shorter than the others. Just a few lines. "Mom, thank you for letting me visit. I didn't realize how much I missed just being with you. No expectations, no asking, no tension. Lily keeps asking if you liked the frog. I told her you put it on your windowsill. She smiled for an hour straight. Tommy wants to visit next time when you're ready. Love, Marissa." I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't want to, because I wanted to mean it when I did. I waited until the weekend. Then I sent a postcard. No envelope, no long message, just this. Tell Tommy I'm saving a spot on the windowsill for a turtle. The next day, she called. Her voice was lighter, softer. Can we come by next Saturday? Just for a few hours. Yes, I said. I'd like that. When they pulled into the driveway, the kids jumped out first. Lily ran straight to me, arms wide. Grandma! Her hair smelled like strawberries. Tommy was more shy. He hung back, holding something behind his back. When I bent down to his level, he pulled it out. A clay turtle. This one was painted blue. The shell was bumpy, and one of the feet had fallen off and been glued back on crooked. I made it for you, he mumbled. I took it like it was glass. I love him, I said. He can sit right next to the frog. Lily clapped. We spent the afternoon outside, drinking lemonade, watching the kids chase squirrels and throw snowballs at trees. Susan sat beside me, silent for a long time. Just being. No gifts, no requests, just presence. When the sun began to dip, they packed up to leave. Tommy hugged me without being asked. Lily blew me a kiss. Marissa lingered. Thank you, she said, her eyes soft. Not just for today, for letting us find our way back. I didn't do it for you, I said gently. She nodded. I know. That's why it worked. They left, and this time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt open. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and looked at my windowsill. A frog, a turtle, and between them, finally, space for something new. Hope. The next few weeks passed slowly, in a way I never appreciated before. Letters came less often now, but the ones that did had joy in them. The kids' schoolwork, a new recipe Marissa tried, a funny thing Henry said that made her laugh even though they were no longer together. She never asked for money. She never hinted at support. And for the first time since she was 18, she didn't need me to carry her. She was carrying herself. One Sunday afternoon, Susan and I sat on my porch drinking tea when she turned to me and asked, "Do you think she's changed?" I thought about that. I think she's changing, and I think that's harder than being changed. It's slower, but it sticks. Susan smiled. Sounds like your heart's opening again. I nodded. Not wide, not fast, but enough. A few days later, I got another letter. Just one sentence. Would it be okay if I called you next Sunday? Just to talk? I smiled. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to brace myself. I just picked up a pen, turned over the postcard still sitting by the phone, and wrote, "Yes. Call me. I'd love to hear your voice." Because I had finally learned. Love that grows slowly might take longer to bloom, but when it does, it never wilts again. Sunday arrived with sunshine pouring through the windows, soft and gold like it was made just for me. I didn't make plans. I didn't set an alarm. I just moved slowly through my morning. Tea, a walk along the lake, a little gardening, letting the hours pass like music. At 3 p.m. sharp, the phone rang. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring once, twice, before I picked it up and held it to my ear. "Hi, Mom," Marissa said, her voice clear and calm. "Hi, sweetheart." We both smiled, though she couldn't see it. For a moment, there was silence. Comfortable, not awkward. Then she asked, "How was your week?" I almost laughed, because it had been years since she asked that question without following it with, "Can I borrow?" or "Do you mind?" "It was good," I said. "Quiet." I finished a book, planted tulip bulbs, and finally cleaned out the shed. "Sounds peaceful." "It is." "What about you?" I asked. She exhaled. "Long week. We had lice at school. Took 5 days to contain it. I thought I was safe, but Lily brought home a little souvenir." "Oh, no," I said, laughing. "Welcome to motherhood." "Yeah," she said, chuckling softly. "It's a full-time job." We talked for an hour. About nothing and everything. The kind of talk that happens when no one needs anything except connection. She told me Tommy had started drawing again, spaceships and frogs and one extremely terrifying-looking snowman. Lily had lost a tooth and left a handwritten note for the tooth fairy. "Please give me $5. I need new crayons." I shared that I'd joined a pottery class at the community center. "Maybe I'll catch up to Tommy's turtle skills one day," I joked. Marissa laughed, a real one from the chest, not the polite kind you give out of obligation. And in that moment, I knew something had changed. Not just in her, but in us. She no longer sounded like a woman trying to apologize. She sounded like a daughter trying to build something better. Brick by brick, moment by moment. Toward the end of the call, she hesitated. I could feel it through the phone. "Mom?" "Hmm?" "I know I don't deserve to ask this yet, and I understand if the answer is no, but would it be all right if the kids and I came up for Easter? No pressure. We'd just like to be with you." I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be sure I was saying yes for the right reason. Not from guilt, not from habit, not from fear, but from hope. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'd like that." She sniffled, and I could hear her trying not to cry. "Thank you." "Thank you, Marissa," I said, "for choosing this, for choosing us." After we hung up, I sat on the porch and stared at the lake. The water was still. A heron landed near the edge, standing motionless like a statue before taking off again, soaring into the sky with a grace that made my breath catch. I thought back to that version of myself a year ago, sitting in an office filled with papers, drowning in responsibilities I thought were love. I thought of that plastic flower on the kitchen counter, the one that once felt like a dagger. And I thought of the clay frog and turtle now resting on my windowsill, sunlit and smiling. It was strange the way healing came. Not in grand gestures, but in small ones. Not in diamonds or cruises, but in a hand-drawn card. A blue turtle. A phone call on a Sunday afternoon. The next day, I wrote a final letter. This time, for myself. "Dear Evelyn, you did the hard thing. You let go. You walked away. You said no, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You stopped saving people who needed to save themselves. You stopped measuring your worth in gifts received or calls returned. You remembered who you were, and you let her breathe again. You gave your daughter something no money ever could: the chance to grow, the chance to change, the chance to love you freely. And now look at what's blooming. Not because you demanded it, not because you paid for it, but because you finally let yourself be seen. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer beside Kenneth's watch and a photograph of my mother. Easter would come soon. The table would be full again. Not because someone needed me to fill it, but because someone wanted to sit at it. And that made all the difference. If you've listened this far, I want to know something from you. What would you have done? Have you ever been taken for granted by someone you love? Have you ever had to walk away to be seen? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far my story has reached. And while you're here, I've left 2 other stories on screen. Each one will take your breath away. Thank you for being part of mine.